It is 11 o'clock. It is the 30th day of October, which means it is spooktober. Spooky, spooky, spooky. Are you scared? I'm using spooky voice, or you should be scared. I am your spooky guide to all things spooky, the OGGM, with another trip down OGGM University, where I toss out pointless facts to you for no reason other than the fact that I like to hear my own voice and I know how to look shit up. So today, let's talk about Halloween, because it's tomorrow. Halloween is weird. It is a very unusual holiday. Unlike the other made-up holidays like St. Patrick's Day or Valentine's Day, who actually sort of have a basis on, at least there is a Valentine dude and there is a St. Patrick dude, there's no Saint Halloween. So what, in fact, does Halloween actually celebrate other than candy? Because, let's face it, it is a holiday, much like Valentine's Day, that was made up more or less to sell candy. It doesn't really celebrate anything. I mean, it celebrates stuff. It definitely has some basis in history, but it's just such a conglomeration of so many little things all meshed together. It is definitely a holiday that is constantly evolving and changing, and we constantly add things to it. Very few other things in our calendar of stuff we choose to celebrate are as amorphous and constantly changing as Halloween. Like, you know, the drive, the let's decorate our yard like a haunted house. Where the fuck did that come from? When did we start doing that? And why? How does that have anything to do with what Halloween sort of is based on? I don't know. It does. It just is. It's just something that started and people just started doing it. So what is, just take everything away, what is the historical basis for this very bizarre holiday? And we're science and history and anthropology is 90% sure it started because of two things. I mean, first and foremost, it's fall. So a lot of cultures end their harvest season around this point in time, or did when we still did harvesting, like that kind of shit. And new winter was coming. So it was a time to prepare for winter, bring in the harvest, have big parties, and get ready for the long, cold winter. So we know that that's probably the basis for Halloween. It is a celebration of the end of the season. It's a celebration of fall. It's a celebration of going into winter and stuff like that. Now, at one point in time, Halloween was also the end of the year. It was New Year's Eve on an old calendar, on the Day of the Dead, when the year 2 dies. So, at least at some point, it was celebrating the end of the year, the end of the harvest year. Fall has coming to an end. Winter is starting. We are celebrating the end of the harvest year. So, yeah. So, and we know that there are some connotations with Halloween and the Celtics, that it meant something to them, and that it was Samhain. We also know there's Días de la Muerte, the Mexican Day of the Dead, the day that we celebrate our loved ones who have left us by leaving out food for them, leaving out alcohol for them, and basically celebrating because this is the one time of the year they get to come back and visit. It wasn't a scary, sad thing. It was a happy celebration. Días de la Muerte is very happy. It's like, welcome back, Uncle Steve. Here's the one day that you can still be with your family. Here's some tequila. So, way back then, lots of little cultures around the world celebrated the end of the harvest season, the beginning of winter, this way. With parties, with bringing in the harvest, with making sure everybody's okay and all your neighbors are okay. There might have been a little sex because, most of these holidays are somehow related to fertility festivals. Then we have the Hispanic culture and the Dios de la Muerte, which also probably comes from, leaving out food for the dead. Probably also comes from harvesting. It probably all relates back to harvest festivals. The idea that the winter is coming, let's bring in the harvest, let's have a party, much like Thanksgiving, to celebrate that we've survived another year and we have an abundance of food. And then you add to that lots of little different things that sort of help create this made-up holiday, things that sort of happened around that time of year that sort of conglomerate to become what we know is more or less the basis for Halloween. So those are the idea that the spirits can walk the earth on that day. Where does that come from? There's no contextual proof. It's just sort of a agreed upon belief that has been passed down from generation to generation that around that time of year, the barrier between the living and the dead is much thinner, and the dead can come and visit the living. It's also, back then we believed in things like spirits and sprites, and so it could be, that this was also the time of the year where people believed the barrier between the world of the fairy and the world of the humans was also thin, that they could come and do things, play tricks on you. Now, in order to placate the dead, placate the fairies, many cultures left food out to say, here is some food, don't, take my baby, don't curdle my milk, don't play tricks on me. I'm leaving some of the harvest out for you so that you will, be kindly to my house. So this is probably how trick or treat started. If I feed the spirits, they will not bother my house. They will not trick me if I leave them a treat. There is some historical documentation that people knew about this. So they would go and dress up, put a mask on, and go to these houses that were leaving food out and take the food. So this is probably how trick or treat started. It's very convoluted, it's very messy, but there's some general belief that the idea of going house to house and taking food somehow comes from this belief that if you left food out, the dead would not be mean to you, or the spirits would not be mean to you. And that people saw this and went, would dress up or whatever and would take the food so that, and, then it became, if I leave food out for this person, he will not trick my house. One of these, so that's kind of, we think, how that whole thing started. Then we get to the Jacko Lantern. Where did the idea of carving out a pumpkin and putting a candle in it come from? Well, probably came from the fact that we needed a light source. And it was cool. I have this gourd. I've taken out everything from the gourd that is useful for making pie and food. Now I just sort of have this hollow subject, this very heavy hollow thing. If I cut a hole in this hollow thing and put a candle in it and leave it outside so that when people who are coming to my house can find the way in the dark, it's heavy. So chances are it won't roll over in the wind. So they would hollow out, put a candle in it, put it outside. This is where my house is, so you can find it in the dark. And this is heavy. It won't roll over in the wind. So that's probably how jack-o'-lanterns got started. Also, there is the whole, he had a jack-o'-lantern on his head. Was there a jack-o'-lantern? It kind of goes back to the same origins of like the Peeping Tom. That there was a story about a guy and he did something and he lost his head, or he wore a pumpkin on his head. It's very unsure. Each individual small little community has their own version, but basically somewhere under all this myth, there's a story about a guy who, for whatever reason, had a pumpkin on his head. So, and Jack is a very common name, let's face it. So it probably has the same origins in an actual event that like Peeping Tom did, or at least what we think is an actual event. It's very hard to differentiate stories and legends and myth from things that actually happened a long time ago. But we do know harvest. We do know harvest celebration. We do know fall was becoming winter. We do know that at least one calendar in the past, it was the end of the year, the day the year ended, which was also for many people, at least this time of year, when the barrier between the real world and the ephemeral world, be that the dead or fairies or whatever. So you would leave things out to appease them so they wouldn't trick your house. And then at some point in time, somebody, probably a kid, got the idea, if I go take this stuff they're leaving out. So then it became, hey, I'm going to leave this stuff out because I know the kid is going to come by this and take it. So here is your food. Do not trick my house. So those are the basis for this very weird holiday. So it's kind of always been part of our culture dating back to a long time ago that we celebrated this event. Now, move forward to after World War II, where all these factories are making stuff and have an excess of stuff and need to sell it. And among those things that were being made about this time of year that needed to be sold were confections and candy. And we knew that there were cultures, such as the Hispanic culture celebrating Dios de la Muerte, that had the idea of leaving food out, leaving candy out, leaving sweets out. So, in the post-industrial revolution, factories have an excess of a product that they cannot get rid of because what do I need a bag of candy for in the middle of October? I'm busy doing other shit. I don't need 200 pieces of candy. Let's make up a reason to sell 200 pieces of candy to people. So they began advertising Halloween. And they began taking bits and pieces of this things from history and cultures and mythology and sort of creating what we now know as Halloween. Why do kids dress up and walk to your house and take stuff? Because at some point in time, there was a belief that if I left this stuff out, these spirits would not bother my house. And if people who dressed up like these spirits came to my house, I had to give them something so they would not mess up my house. They would not steal my baby. They would not curdle my milk. They would not break my windows. That became trick or treat, leaving Jacko Lanterns out. It's probably based upon the fact of, here is a way to come to my house. I'm going to put a candle in this very heavy object and leave it outside because I know it's heavy, so it probably won't be knocked over by the wind. And if somebody takes it, oh well, it's not like my very expensive glass lantern got stolen. The gourd that I spent 10 minutes hauling out got stolen. Big deal. So yeah, this is how we think Halloween got started. Now there are other things, that just make no frickin' sense that we have added onto this holiday. Haunted houses, adult females dressing up like slutty nurses, drinking, Jason and Michael Myers, and that Halloween is this scary, bloody, zombie, gory. Where does that all come from? Where did it go from a simple, sweet, charming night to give away candy to kids to blood and gore and graveyards? No one's really sure. No one's sure who did the first haunted house. We know that the idea of haunted houses come from early dark rides and tunnels of love and, walk through storybook parks and stuff like that. And that evolved to haunted houses. Why? Because if a man and a woman are in a thing in the dark and something jumps out, it is more likely that the woman will grasp the man for protection, therefore increasing the chances that that man's going to get some. So why don't we put some scary jumpy out thing in this tunnel of love, in this railroad, to increase the chances of the man getting some, because it always comes back to either sex or money. Halloween was invented to make candy makers money because they needed it at this point in time. But the cultural significance is there. I mean, it does exist. It doesn't celebrate really anything other than fall. So there you go. Hopefully I have either helped clear your head or made you even further confused, because that's my job, because I'm a childlike elitist and uneducated and a toxic gatekeeper, let's not forget, and the man who makes gaming no fun, your grumpy guide to all things gaming. I hope you appreciate this content. If you do, comment down below. If you don't and want me to shut the fuck up, comment down below. Either way, let me know what you want. And as long as you're doing that, take a moment to subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Help me hit 500 subs by the end of the year. And if I do hit 500 subs by January 1st, I'm going to do something crazy. And as long as you're feeling that, and if you're feeling the spirit of the holidays, maybe you take a moment to support the OGG adventures, because it sort of is my only job right now. I will talk to you holiday losers later.